DMT world is a world that we could not have predicted. It is that strange. It is what Terence McKenna used to call unenglishable.
These substances, they're to me, they're what needs to be researched. I wouldn't want to research anything else because they are the nexus. They kind of represent the nexus between the material and the spiritual, in a way, the science and spirituality. They're like the most spiritual thing that is material, the most material thing that is spiritual.
Okay, what is the DMT extended state to you? What is it?
Pandora's box, mate. Pandora's box.
Justin and I are friends. We're filmmakers, we're dads, we're businessmen, we're normal guys, but we have been on a quest, a mission, seeking, I'm guessing, trying to unpick the secrets of human consciousness. We are psychedelic explorers, psychonauts, for want of a better word, and we have been experimenting with DMT for 15, 16 years now.
So I suppose I found DMT right at a point in my life where I think I needed it. I needed it because I had a fear of death. It was starting to affect me when I would go to sleep. So I remember talking to Paul about it and Paul suggesting this molecule, DMT. So I suppose over those 15 odd years or whatever it has been since we partook in this, I suppose, long-term experiment for us, I've felt, instantly the fear of the death was, I wouldn't say instantly taken away, but it was slightly relieved because of the death of the ego, which you hear a lot about.
I'm a neuroscientist, a pharmacologist, and a chemist, and I am fascinated by psychedelic drugs, by molecules that change the structure of your reality, that change the structure and dynamics of your own private phenomenal world. What these molecules do is they interface with the brain at the molecular level, the level of proteins, and they change the patterns of information, the patterns of activity of your brain, of your cortex. Now the cortex is responsible for constructing the world that you live within. So, from the moment you're dragged screaming from your mother's womb until your inevitable demise, whenever you are conscious and awake, you exist within a world. It's got a phenomenal world, your own personal, subjective world. With DMT, which is the drug that I'm particularly interested in, it seems to transcend this kind of loosening up of the world, and actually you find yourself in an entirely new reality, and a reality that is populated. A bizarre, what's often described as hyperdimensional alien reality, basically. A reality that bears no relationship whatsoever to the normal waking world. And it is invariably teeming sometimes with what appear to be extremely intelligent, entirely alien beings and intelligences that are eager to communicate with you.
My name is Pascal Michael. I'm a PhD student at the University of Greenwich with Dr. David Luke. It's in DMT and near-death experiences, drugs and death specifically, dimethyltryptamine, potent endogenous psychoactive psychedelic chemical, and near-death experiences. Those experiences which happen classically on the precipice of death, which can be profound experiences, mystical type experiences. Why wanting to research something like death, like the field of like thanatology, is because it's a paradox. I think death is a paradox to us. It's like a koan, like, you know, the Buddhist practice of asking these kind of impossible questions, which when you contemplate them, like, lead to some kind of a awakening. It's like that with death, and you continue to contemplate it. It's like a koan, and you can get to a point of greater understanding and awakening. I think if people do that on a societal level, because we completely disregard death at this stage in the society, then it can lead to that on a kind of cultural level. So the implications of if these experiences are indeed very similar and they really resonate, you know, in the broader context of the Renaissance in psychedelic science, psychedelic psychiatry, I mean, DMT, there's already been several DMT trials that have been put out now, planned, scheduled, and there's already loads of good evidence, both from the first wave and now this new second wave of psychedelics for palliative care, for people at the end of their life with terminal illnesses. So if DMT is very much like the near-death experience, I mean, the near-death experience, one of the kind of key, most invariable after effects, kind of beneficial after effects, is this dissolution of existential anxiety, of fear of death.
Human consciousness is the final frontier, really, as far as science is concerned. What makes us conscious, what makes us aware, and these substances, I think, are integral to answering those questions. They're important.
From a neuroscientific perspective, DMT is confounding. Why should the brain, when perturbed by this simple molecule, begin constructing these bizarre alien realities? You know, when did the brain learn, if you like, or when did the brain evolve to be constructing these alien realities? That is a great mystery, and the mystery is kind of deepened or made more profound by the ubiquity of DMT. DMT is not some rare molecule, but is actually ubiquitous in nature. It's found in countless plant species across the globe. Terence McKenna's brother, Dennis McKenna, likes to say that nature is drenched in DMT. What do we make of that? What do we make of the fact that the most common of the naturally occurring psychedelic, the simplest of the naturally occurring psychedelics, also happens to be the one capable of instantaneously transporting you to a bizarre alien reality filled with intelligent beings. You know, what are we to do with that?
What is DMT to me, the experience? So to me, it's like a mirror and a window. So the mirror is kind of, because you're able to step outside of yourself in this kind of multi-dimensional psychedelic jewel encrusted entity laden arena, you are able to step outside of yourself, and you kind of have this ability, a bit like that scene in the film Contact where Jodie Foster's in the pod and her face is skipping out, right? And she's kind of, you're able to, that enables you to step outside of your normal behaviours. So during the experience, I don't think you learn about your behaviour, but in the coming weeks after the experience, because you've been able to step outside, you are able to analyse your behaviours and the way that you interact with other people, the way you interact with your loved ones, and the way you interact with yourself. And that's kind of the healing aspect of it. So the mirror, that's the mirror.
What does the DMT experience mean to me? If I take it as, if I take it on board, what it's done, what it has done, what it can do, it has helped me in times of worry and fear and troubles in my life. It's helped me then to be able to open up and understand what's going on around me, whether it's me, whether it's someone else, how I'm supposed to deal with it, my defects, their defects, whatever it is. It's a good perspective. It gives you a good perspective of your behaviours, of your ego. So what does it mean for me? It's a good leveller. It's a good way of understanding yourself before you try and take on understanding other people or things around you.
So what about from a more psychedelic perspective? Does it mean anything to you outside of that remit of that psychological, the psychological health benefits, as it opens you up to, let's say, belief in existences of other planes of reality, something like that?
Well, when you put it to me like that, it's very difficult for me to break that down. And actually, have I ever been religious? No. After doing DMT and going through into some of those places, do I believe there's something else? Yes.
The window is looking through a window into something else, and whether or not it is something else or whether or not it's just manifested in the brain is obviously yet to be proven, and more discussion needs to be had. But it does feel intrinsically like there is another level of reality that you are able to, for a very short period of time, look at and be a part of. And whether or not it's the dying process, whether or not that is a space that you travel through after death, the jury's out, as you said, the jury's out. But it is the prospect of what that could be, what that space could actually be, is terrifying.
I often think of the brain as like it's like a this mystical machine. It's compellingly mechanical in the way that it works, but there's something else about it, something intrinsically different about it in terms of how it has this relationship with consciousness. So you can see, I mean, even with DMT, for instance, there's some evidence of it being like a dream state, right? Like even at the level of the brain, there's this potentially sort of theta band, this sort of slow wave activity in the kind of temporal cortices, and that's very much like a correlate of what you see with dreams. Dreams, like we are such stuff as dreams are made on. It's like Shakespeare quote, and so it's not we don't necessarily have to reduce it and have recourse to this reductionism of all these neurochemicals in the brain when you die, and that's just what the near-death experience is. It doesn't. You can't just throw the transcendental baby out with the bathwater. Like, I don't think it could be that we're being given access to a deeper reality potentially. Like, it could well be the unconscious that you're tapping into, but an unconscious which is more like a Jungian kind of collective unconscious. It has like this imaginal quality to it, and Jung used this term imaginal and to kind of mean this greater numinous reality, which is, it's not just imagination, it's something, there's a greater reality underlying it. And William James is like the great grandfather of like modern psychology. He referred to the unconscious as that which contains everything, that the larger part of ourselves, and it's that which we could potentially be plumbed into when we have these types of psychedelic experiences, or when we are at the brink of death.
I've always had a yearning for the truth as to what reality is all about, life, death, everything that's involved in that. And to me, DMT is kind of the answer, but at the same time, the answer that's constantly moving away from you, because you never achieve any, you never gain any ground in that space. Yes, you do get information, and it is bizarrely beautiful and terrifying and so alien, and there's kind of this knowing that there's something ethereal to it, but you never kind of gain any ground with it. And I think the extended state will probably, hopefully, shed some light on that.
Yes. So the people that would go in, I would suppose, apart from your first test subjects, you'd then want to send people in who were, physicists, mathematicians, code breakers, people who could understand this stuff and break it down. And in that perspective, I suppose, like I said, time would be something that you would start to get a grip on. But like I said, when you're in there for those 10 minutes maximum, it can feel like a lifetime. So if you're in there for 2 months, God only knows, it's either going to feel like the same amount of time, or it's gonna, I can't even express what that would mean.
The question is then, what do we do with DMT? How do we explore this space? How do we get to grips with the DMT space to try and get to the bottom of what the DMT space is? Where is it from? Where is it? What are these beings? Where are they from? Why does DMT allow us to access their domain? These are the kind of questions that I'm interested in answering.
So the extended state, the continuous infusion of DMT, that's interesting business. It's, the implications of that, there's certainly amazing possible clinical implications, because like with DMT, it's like approximately 10-minute trip, and sometimes it's exceptionally hard to recall what it was that just happened to you. And so with the extended state, you kind of extend that DMT experience, and it should become more recollectable, and it should therefore lend itself more to integration. That's the bedrock of psychedelic assisted psychotherapy, is you not only need to prepare the individual for the experience and hold the experience well, but crucial linchpin of it is proper integration of it after. But you can't really integrate something if it's just shattered your mind sort of temporarily, and you can't even remember what exactly it was that just happened, and you can't bring the details of the elements of the experience back with you. So with the extended state, hopefully that's something that can be achieved better.
For target-controlled intravenous infusion to work, what you need is a good pharmacokinetic model. So you need a good model of how the drug is metabolized and distributed throughout the body. And to get that, the only way you can get that is by actually injecting people with DMT and then drawing their blood at intervals and measuring the concentration of DMT in the blood. And that gives you a profile of how the DMT levels in the blood change over time. And from that data, you can then develop this kind of mathematical pharmacokinetic model that can then be used to inform a target-controlled intravenous infusion model. Having read Rick's papers, I knew that he had done this work, that he had this blood concentration over time data, because it was in one or two of the papers that he published during that time. So I had this idea that if we could develop this pharmacokinetic model, we could actually use this infusion technology with DMT that would allow us to maintain a stable brain concentration of DMT over time. And so I emailed Rick and I said, hey Rick, I was wondering, do you have this blood data from all these years ago? And fortunately he did. So within an hour or so he replied and sent me this Microsoft Excel file that had all of this original blood data. So this was like fantastic. So I did this modelling and I then wrote this paper back in 2016 with Rick, which we published, which was this kind of proof of principle model. We were basically saying to the world, if you like, the sort of scientific psychedelics science world, that yeah, we have an idea here. We think this could work. We think that DMT could be used in this way, that you can actually extend a DMT experience for an indefinite period of time and actually conduct experiments and establish communication with alien intelligences within the DMT space.
It's also, like I was saying before about DMT being very neuroprotective. Again, that's something which may well have like very important clinical implication, because it's the kind of neurogenic capacity of these chemicals, which seems to be something which, you know, may well be driving the therapeutic efficacy, because it grows your brain at the end of the day. And if you do that with DMT, it has these potent properties for an extended amount of time. It kind of bathing your brain in it, really, it can generate this neurogenesis, and then that kind of lends itself to potentially, you know, what I'm kind of looking at DMT for in terms of its relationship to a near-death experience. And it's one thing to look at these short-acting DMT experiences and compare them with the NDE, but with the extended state, hopefully the participants can bring back more, you know, from their traversing of these undiscovered countries, you know, and they're coming back with more data and more intel. And so it's a richer cartography of that other world to look at how it compares to these otherworldly travels that these thanatonauts, these people who go beyond the rounds of death, you know, after cardiac arrest or in coma, you know, bring back with them.
With the DMT experience, two things are present, really. One is that actually physiologically the brain is being reset. The default mode network is kind of shut down, and the paths, the brain function is able to find new paths, find new pathways. But the second, I think, is just being ripped out of your body, and the whole ego dissolution aspect of this experience is that in itself is to face death. People go through their lives not ever really being challenged. You know, you could go through your life and not have to be courageous once if you wanted to, not face a confrontation, not be challenged in any way. That's just the world we live in now. But this puts you right on the cliff edge. It puts you right on the cliff edge, and it says you're jumping off that cliff no matter what. There's nothing you can do about it. You're jumping, and the courage to jump is where the therapy takes place. That in having jumped, made that leap, and then kind of coming back from that is, for me, is where the healing benefits come from.
There is a belief out there that there is information that is in these other realms, these other dimensions, and that information is very difficult to hang on to and then bring back once you come back into our bodies, into our reality. So what it means to me is that if you're in there for a prolonged amount of time, the hope is that you will become accustomed to these other realms, and that then the information that is given is then retained better. So what we may learn from that is anyone's guess. I don't even know if you could speculate on it. More maths, different understanding of dimensions, understanding of space. Oh, who knows?
If you're involved in this genre and you are a psychonaut, then the prospect of, you know, I don't know anyone who's had the DMT experience that's come out of it and said that's just completely in the brain. It's in the brain. That's all there is to it. It's in the brain. You question everything. It will change your worldview. 100%. It will change your worldview. So to look at this extended state, if you've had that experience, then you look at the extended state and you think, well, what could be the outcome of being in that space for 24 hours? You know, does it stabilise? Does it do the entities become more coherent? And could information be passed over to us from that space over a prolonged period of time? Then where the sky's the limit. I mean, if these entities and experiences are nothing you can ever even imagine of what these things are and how they communicate, and if it is some kind of alien technology or some, you know, the sky's the limit. But then where does that put us in the physical world? What could be the outcome of communication with discarnate intelligence from a parallel dimension? You know, could all our prayers be answered? Could our science evolve light years over a very short period of time? Possibly. Anything's possible with DMT.
What will the nature of these experiments be? It's difficult to say, but I think it's likely that some kind of mapping of the space. You know, what is the actual structure of the space? What is the geometry of the space? Are there levels of the space that we can somehow map? And of course the intelligences themselves.
This is, you know, it's like with, you know, Graham Hancock likes to say that when he asked, you know, the shamans, like, why are we in the West, like the modern West, why are we in the situation that we're in? It's like, well, it's very simple. You've severed your connection with spirit. And I think we've found that, I think, in a very topical kind of current sense with coronavirus. And it's this disconnection from spirit, this disconnection from our environment, this total dissociation from our environment, sentient species around us, that we may well have got ourselves in this situation in the first place with the pandemic. But that's had, untold kind of repercussions, I think, for a lot of people, because we've been suddenly confronted with our own mortality, and that can only be something that if we actually choose to properly reflect on that, then that itself can become more at home with death, just in the same way that having these psychedelic experiences lends itself to the chaos that is inherent in nature, and the fact that we are inevitably walking towards entropy. Whether or not that entropy means total dissolution, annihilation, or total re-enchantment and connection with the universe.
What's been nice to see is that actually a number of people, a number of groups, both kind of professional, kind of scientific, academic groups, as well as more kind of, I wouldn't say amateurs, but people who are kind of outside of the normal kind of mainstream academic community, have also become very interested in attempting to actually bring this model into the real world, so to speak, to actually bring it to a state where it actually can be deployed in human volunteers.
It's amazing if this continues to happen, and this is, again, a fundamental part of the mainstreaming of psychedelics. And when that happens, people become more sympathetic to and understanding of these other states. There could be this transition, the shift from this sort of culture, which is essentially monophasic in its kind of almost obsessive inhabitation of like the ego kind of state of mind, toward this sort of polyphasic culture where there's an understanding of the fluidity between different states of mind and the inherent benefit and goodness of these different states. And so when more people are convinced of this, when it becomes licensed for as a medicine, where it then percolates into the legal system, and then that in itself means that generally just the mass psyche is more receptive to these experiences, and more people will be having these experiences near death, experiences which replicate the death experience, which make people understand what death is all about, essentially. And there's the writer of a recent book, The Immortality Key, who is arguing for these chemicals, these psychedelics, to have been, during the mystery schools, ancient mystery schools, might have been the progenitor to what we understand as like modern religion and even Christianity. Like he says about these experiences in these mystery schools with these psychedelics that it's to die before you die, so that you won't die when you die. And so with the mainstreaming of these sacraments, more people can potentially die before they die.